A lot of what I focus on in my line of work is helping people figure out how to learn things in a way that sticks, and a way to learn things in a way that lasts long term. Because I help people learn how to be game developers for their entire lifetime, not how to, you know, dabble in for a weekend, not how to just try it out, but to become game developers is a lasting part of their identity. It's part of who they are. And so, as part of that, we have to make sure they're building a good foundation, and a good foundation is often built on making mistakes in order, in the right order, to making mistakes that are appropriate for the level that we're at, so we don't make them at the higher levels up. And this is something that, depending on someone's teaching methodology, one of the differences between my approach with Gamkedo, whether it's my private training, my materials, my club, or otherwise, in contrast to how traditional institutions often focus on teaching, is that we encourage, we kind of steer people into making those mistakes early, making those mistakes when it's small and safe, making those mistakes at the right size. And the reason for that is because you want to get those mistakes out of your system while they're still so recoverable, while the damage is so minor. I think so. For the thumbnail for this image, for example, I think I used a picture of rock climbing. And what I like about that as an example is, if you've seen people who do indoor rock climbing, a lot of them are building up practice before they go to outdoor rock climbing. And even then, within the rock climbing areas, indoors, there's different size walls, different levels of difficulty. And if we picture someone who's new to that sport, new to that hobby, just trying to become familiar with the equipment, right? Certain kind of mistakes they should make while they're still on the floor, sitting in a chair, trying to learn how things latch and don't before they're counting on that equipment. And even then, as someone who's climbing early in their experience level, there's certain mistakes that you want them to make on the safest, smallest, easiest wall possible with the most cushion and padding below them. Because if they make mistakes at that level, there's nothing bad going to happen. It's completely safe. It's completely fine. But they can get those mistakes out of their system. They can experiment a little bit. They can see what doesn't happen. They can learn those boundaries. So when they go the next level up to a little harder wall, to a little higher, a little steeper, sort of climbing experience, maybe less good handholds, then they're learning about a next level of little mistakes to make that they can recover from, because they're making smaller and smaller errors each time. So that hopefully by the time that they are out there on a rock face and they, have to deal with next level of concerns, it's an environment that is entirely not designed, like an indoor space is, around the shape of the human hands and so on, to be easy to grab and easy to climb on, that they've worked out all their bigger errors in safer environments. So by that point, the mistakes they're learning from, because they're still going to be learning, but will hopefully be so small that it's not nearly going to be as life-threatening as it might be if they had just gone out there unprepared and started trying to climb wild rock faces. And so the same sort of thing, like breaking from the physical metaphor, in game programming is something that we see all the time, where you don't want to make these kind of errors on enormous projects with lots of people involved over long periods of time. You want to make those mistakes on small projects, on simple projects, on spaces where you can really get things wrong and survive the fall. And more importantly, be able to see the results, to see yourself fall. This is what I talk about as being different about Gamkedo's approach, that I actually encourage people to, for example, before they start architecting their code and designing out their processes and trying to draw a bunch of diagrams based on hypotheticals, we let them, encourage them, steer them towards, make some messy code. Make some small games where you start to hit that limit and that barrier of, oof, I'm feeling that pain from my wish that this had been organized or thought through a little bit further, a little bit ahead, a little bit better. And that helps them learn where that line is. Because we talk about one of the differences between highly efficient, highly effective programmers and people who are just not. And people talk about like a 10x difference between really efficient programmers and people who aren't. Is I often find it's people who, the ones who are highly efficient, know where those lines are of when, why, and where. They can calculate it, make trade-offs between this is small enough, I can get away with this, versus this is a little bigger, longer term, bigger in scope, we got to handle this differently. When they can switch those gears seamlessly, they can jump between a lot more work and get a lot faster results than somebody who always approaches things from a dogmatic perspective of all they've ever learned was do things a certain way, because this is how we would do them if you were in a 300,000 line code base with 200 other employees in it, which is not always the situation that we're in. And even within a single given task, there may still be, like I say, gradients to gear shift between of bigger and smaller pieces to handle different ways. And in order to have that understanding, we can't just be parroting someone else's lessons that they've learned without understanding the deeper mistakes and challenges that those lessons are developed around us avoiding. We learn those by making mistakes in order, by learning through the process of making those errors, seeing ourselves run into those complications, and then and only then, in that situation, that context, learning, okay, here's the way over that. Negotiating that as to, okay, now I've internalized deeply as part of my understanding of this, here's how and why that other way of doing things exists, seeing and feeling that appreciation for it, and knowing the alternative, instead of, like I say, trying to just remember and memorize rote dogmatism like, okay, we always do things a certain way because my professor said so, as opposed to because here's the trade-offs involved in that way of doing things versus this way. That's the thought for the day. Thank you as always for tuning in. Have another video tomorrow.